Thanks for tuning in to the Charles Novell School of Music podcast, The Best Day Yet. Here you'll find tips, insight, and information to help your music and your ministry succeed. Whether you're a singer, a musician, or a songwriter, we want to help you where you are, but we also want to help you get to where you want to go. We believe that our talents are God's gift to us, but what we do with those are our gift back to God. Yesterday's information is important, but what we can learn today will make this the best day yet. The Charles Novell School of Music is coming to Central Florida February 21st through the 22nd, 2025. Our weekend regional sessions are a chance to study voice, instrumentation, songwriting, social media, technology, and more. For more information, contact us at www.cnsmusic.com. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Charles Novell School of Music podcast, The Best Day Yet. Today's episode is a special one. It comes from a live session from CNS 24 that took place in July at Murray State University in Murray, Kentucky. Our special guest today is Mark Bishop. So let's go into that session from CNS 24. We are at CNS 24. It is Monday, and we have our special guest, Mark Bishop, here. We have our students in the room. Students, can we make Mark welcome? All right. Again, Mark, thank you for being here. So many just great memories and just respect for you and your family.
Thank you.
Your dad, absolutely one of the finest humans I've ever met in my life.
It was like growing up with Andy Griffith as your dad.
Right?
I never got a spanking, a whipping. We called it a whipping there in eastern Kentucky. I never got a whipping that I didn't get an explanation first. And sometimes I got 2 or 3 explanations a day.
You know, what's up with that? This is going to hurt me worse than it hurts you. I would say, well, then don't hurt yourself, Mom.
Yeah.
You know, I mean.
Mom was the one that we feared growing up. Me and my brothers. Dad was the softy. You know, he would, if we got a spanking from Dad, he was crying when he did it. Mom had no such reservations. I think she kind of enjoyed it a little too much.
Right? Swing first, ask questions later.
And we deserved it, no doubt.
Yeah, I got one once I didn't deserve, and my mom still feels bad about that. And I'm like, look,
I forgive you.
You're one to all the ones I didn't get. We're even. We're good. We're good. But no, man, when I look back at when I traveled early 90s, the Bishops were, that was, again, one of my favorite groups. When I would look at the back of the Singing News to figure it all out and see where we were singing, who we were singing with. I always got excited when I saw you all. Okay, so let's do this. You, over the years, have established yourself as an amazing vocalist, a performer, entertainer. Yes, I said the E word. You know, there has to be a little bit of that in what we do, okay? Even with our preaching, our pastors, I need to hear a joke to stay engaged. You know, there has to be a little bit of that. So you're one of the greatest vocalists, performers, songwriters in our genre of music. And so my question is this. Give us what got you here. What got you to 2024? How did you know that this was what you were to be doing?
I still don't know what I'm going to be when I grow up. I've just been doing this up until that point in my life. But we backed into it back in 1980. Well, in the 80s, growing up in the 70s, we grew up at a little country church. The entire building could fit inside of this room here today. And we grew up listening to music, gospel singing jubilee on Sunday mornings, but that's all I knew about gospel music. And then the congregational singing at our church, which sounded nothing like what they were doing on the gospel singing jubilee,
right.
You know, from the professional groups. And me and my dad and my brother would get up and we would sing in church. And our biggest fan was Granny Bishop. Have I got time to tell the entire story?
Absolutely.
All right, because so we were we were singing. Granny Bishop was sitting in the front row here, and she looked just exactly like what you'd think a Granny Bishop would look like at the South Irvin Pentecostal Church of God back in the 70s. She had the beehive hairdo and the granny glasses, the turtle shell granny glasses, and she sat there, and Granny Bishop was a saint of God. If Granny Bishop wasn't going to make it into heaven, nobody is going to make it.
Right.
She was the prayer warrior in our community, in our church, in our family. If you had to get a hold of God, they called Granny Bishop and let her pray about it. She was that woman. She would sit and she would listen to us sing, tears streaming down her face. As she got up in years, her arthritis had gotten so bad that her arms and legs were just drawn up in knots. In the last 2 years of her life, she lived in a lot of pain. I had a hard time as a young Christian reconciling that, asking God all the time, here is this person that could not love you anymore, and she's suffering. When I see people that aren't even trying, and it seems like they prosper in life, God, I'm having trouble with that. That doesn't make sense to me. It got to the point to where she couldn't even come to church anymore. She was just about basically immobilized. One of the things that she missed about not being able to come to church is she couldn't hear her son and her grandson sing. So in a little while, she gave my dad a $500 check, wrote it out of her personal checking account back in 1984, if we would go to a local recording studio and record the songs that we had been singing in church so she could listen to us at home because she could no longer come to church. And so we booked some time, went to this little studio in Winchester, Kentucky. We went, paid the money. The guy was going to record our album. We took our church band with us to record it. And I remember that producer telling my dad, he said, Mr. Bishop, with your $500, we'll record your album, and then you'll get a box of 100 albums and a box of 100 cassette tapes. And my dad said, we just want one. He said, it doesn't work that way. They have a minimum at the pressing plant on how many they'll make. So you're going to get a box of 100 albums, box of 100 cassette tapes. We recorded it a couple of months later, sitting on our front porch. The Postal Service had delivered a box of albums and a box of cassette tapes. We went in the house. We got a brown paper croaker bag, filled it up with albums, filled it up with cassette tapes. We took those to Granny. We still had half of them left. We took them to church. We kept singing at our little church with about the 30 or 40 albums that we had. And we would sing. If somebody came up and said, we enjoyed your song at church this morning, we'd reach back into a box, grab one of those and say, well, here, take one of these. We gave them every one away. We didn't know you're supposed to sell those and recoup your $500. That's how good a businessman that we were. And so we gave them all away, and then they were just gone. It was just gone. We'd recorded it for Granny, but a few months passed by. Somehow, and this was in 1984 too, somehow one of those 100 albums, and I drew the artwork for this album in my high school study hall.
Wow.
And it looks like it. It looks like it was carved into a wooden desk, like the Van Halen symbol or something. But anyway, one of those albums made its way to the next county over, WBFC radio. Jerry Wilson started playing that on Saturdays on his local artist thing. And so now we were getting a few calls to come sing at some other churches that were local. Now we weren't just singing in our church, we were singing a couple of counties around. And then it happened that Dave Wilcox from Morning Star Records back in the 80s was driving around the country to different radio stations with stacks of 45 singles, and he was promoting his groups, the McCameys and the Spencers and some different ones back then that we were just getting started too. And he heard us on the radio. He said, Jerry, he said, who's that on the radio right now? He said, that's the Bishop family. They live the next town over. He said, get me their phone number. He called us up, said, how would y'all like to come to Nashville and record an album with some real musicians? You talking about a bunch of country boys that had never been anywhere or done anything? We loaded up the truck and we went to Nashville. And we recorded an album down there with them. It took us about 5 days or so, and then we drove back the 4 hours back to the house. Halfway home, I think one of us said, well, I guess in about 2 months we'll get a box of albums and a box of cassette tapes. We thought that's how the music business worked. This time we're going to sell them. We got back home. What did happen, and we didn't know this, is they'd sent out 2,045 singles to radio stations all across the country. Dave called us up. He said, congratulations, y'all have got a hit song. We said, which radio station? He said, all of them, brother, all of them. Now we started getting calls from all over the country to come and sing. We all still had full-time jobs, but we would see how far can we drive on a Friday afternoon and sing Friday and Saturday and Sunday morning. Then Sunday, can we get back to work at 8 o'clock on Monday morning? We did that until we were exhausted. And then we had some hit songs in the back 87. We did a song called Lazarus Come Forth.
Right.
That just now the booking agency wants to schedule all of your dates. And now we had the long-term contract. Before we knew it, we were leaving our jobs and we had a full-time job because it was all that, and we prayed about that for a long time. Mm-hmm. So now the crowds kept getting bigger. We were traveling around. That one little album grew, and before we knew it, then John Hagee said, come sing at my church, and Charles Stanley said, come sing at our church, and Bill Gaither called and said, come do the videos. Back then TNN was on the air, so they said, come do Nashville Now with Ralph Emery and Crook and Chase, and the Grand Ole Opry was televised on Saturday nights, and every place that you could sing a gospel song, we were out singing gospel songs. And then the crowds were getting bigger because we were singing to people that didn't even know about gospel music, but they just liked the sound of it. And so doing a lot of the Gaither videos and stuff, we were singing at the Atlanta Dome, or the Georgia Dome rather, in Atlanta. And I think they said there were close to 60,000 people at this one thing. It was one of the biggest ones that he had put together with all the groups. And it was our turn to get up and sing. We got up to sing. Sitting on the front row was a little old lady with a beehive hairdo and the granny glasses. Now, my granny had long since passed away. But as I stood there in that moment, and all the years that had passed, and all the places that we'd sung, and how God had blessed our ministry, and I looked out at a sea of people and I couldn't see the end of it. It was so many. But I did see her. And suddenly that thing that I could never reconcile, God reconciled it for me. Because I thought, the reason that we're standing here singing to all of these people right now, and the reason that we've sung on all the shows and all the places that you can tell people about the gospel, the reason that happened is because Granny Bishop had crippling arthritis. Had that part not happened, none of the other of it would have happened. And so what Satan saw as a victory, God saw it in a complete different situation.
Right.
Satan said, look, I've got this saint of God that you love, and I'm torturing her. She's miserable. And God saw the same situation and said, watch what I can do with it. And millions were blessed because of it. And you might be here today thinking, God can't use my situation, and I can't see the good in it. I can't see how this could turn into anything good. God sees it differently than we do. He sees the entire puzzle. You're seeing a few pieces at a time. He sees the entire puzzle. He sees the entire tapestry. You ask how I got here today? Granny Bishop.
Wow. Woo. I don't know, Mark, I've ever been speechless. I mean, golly. Boy, what just happened was biblical. Asking you shall receive. I asked the first question on my list, and boy, did we get a response. Yeah, I'm thinking. Yeah, I remember the first cruise I did with Perfect Heart. David Ring was on that cruise, and he severely crippled, handicapped, and he made his way to the microphone. And the first words out of his mouth changed my life. He said, "Why do bad things happen to good people?" And the hundreds, low number, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that you all were able to minister to because of your granny sitting there. Also, while you were talking about that, I realized we had something else in common. Perfect Heart was doing them co-ops in Kentucky. And we were out there and we were doing our thing. And I told class earlier, so my life's dream was to get on a bus and go. And but I was a Yankee Pentecostal placed on a bus full of a bunch of Southern Baptists. It was oil and water. We passed thousands of miles with deep theological discussions. But we were at this co-op in Kentucky, and this sweet lady, beehive hairdo, glasses, she got blessed, and she started chicken strutting across to that stage, shouting, just blessed, just moving. So we're out on the bus changing afterwards, and Mark's bunk Lanier was beside me. He said, Robbie, he didn't look at me, didn't. I said, yeah. He said, good to have your grandma with us this morning.
That sounds just like him.
Right? All right. Man, as good as that first question went.
We did those co-ops too, and what he's talking about there in Kentucky, they've got the rural electric co-ops. And every state might be different on how they lay out their electric grid, but the RECC handles, and maybe a co-op will handle 2 or 3 or 4 counties.
Okay.
In an area. So there are I think 29 co-ops in the state of Kentucky, and they would have a night where they would have a concert and a lot of stuff, and then the people come in, and they'll have thousands of people at these. So, and they would book you for every one of these, or
right.
They did back then. We would kind of alternate between the bishops one year and the Neelands the next year and the bishops. And so we would go from in 29 or in about 32 days, you'd cover 29 concerts straight in a row, and it was every night. It was the bishops, Bob Brizendine, the magician, a beauty contest, and a drawing for a washer and a dryer. And Lord help you if they gave away that washer and dryer before you did your part of the program, because those people were taking their bucket of light bulbs and they were leaving.
Right. Thank you. 40 years later, I still didn't know why we did those, so thank you for that.
That's
right
what
there.
it is. That's what it
When
is.
I first saw it on our schedule, I'm like, coop? We're singing at a chicken coop? What's coop? And it was co-op, but I thought it was coop. Next question. Did you ever win that beauty contest?
No, I can't tell any stories about that.
Okay. All
Well,
right.
they used to. I just won't name the piano player, but the piano player that was with the bishops at the time had to play "You Are So Beautiful" for the swimsuit competition, and he missed a lot of notes.
I bet he did. I bet he did. I didn't know that. Back then, I would have applied for the job, Mark. I didn't know that. Because I could have missed a lot of notes for you. That's funny. That's funny. Okay, so musically, because this is getting to a question I'm going to ask in a minute, based on the 2 songs, actually, that you just sang. What were your musical influences growing up?
We grew up like a lot of people with the Gospel Singing Jubilee on Sunday mornings. That was my first exposure to professional gospel music. Now, I'd always just heard church music, heard church singers, and some are better than others. Mm-hmm. But that was my first exposure. But then as you get older too, I never did have any trouble, listening to like singer-songwritery type
right.
stuff. I love just anything that tells a story. One of the most impactful songs I think I ever heard was Gordon Lightfoot singing about the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. But I just loved how that whole thing. Wow, I'm there.
Right.
I'm there watching all of this happen. And then James Taylor is kind of like that too. But in gospel music, my favorite groups, the ones that I gravitated towards, and I didn't even know it at the time why, was like the Rambos and the Hensons, and then later on it was Mike Payne and the
right.
Paynes. And what I realized were these groups wrote their own stuff. Okay. So there was just some kind of connection to me in that they were not just singing somebody else's song, but they were singing their heart, because this is how they felt.
Right.
And so they were really able to put their emotion in those songs. So I liked groups that had songwriters within them.
Hey, Rob Novell here with the Charles Novell School of Music. I wanted to take a second to tell you about our next national session, CNS 25, that'll be taking place June 22nd through the 28th at Bethel University in McKenzie, Tennessee. What could God do with your life, your music, and your ministry if you simply gave Him 1 week of your time? At CNS, you can study voice, piano, guitar, songwriting, bass guitar, drums, sound and technology, social media, group training, and more. For more information, reach out to us at www.cnsmusic.com. So I see a bigger response to my question in the fact that you were following Gordon's and Taylor's, but God was having you follow your heart through people that preceded you in this genre of music that found their calling because they found their lane. And man, you know, so let's just go just this week. Dave Clark will be here tomorrow and Wednesday. Jim and Melissa Brady will be here Wednesday. And then we've had, you know, your Kenna Turners and your Gordon Jensens and Ronnie Hensons. We've had a lot of great songwriters here at this school over the years. I don't know that any of them fit the storyteller board like Mark Bishop. What I love about hearing you sing, and it was even back with the Bishops, was, man, I wanted to sit and listen to every word. And here's a confession out of me. I'm a musician. I sat and watched Gold City in those years because I wanted to watch the band. I'd go to the Henson's concerts growing up because I wanted to watch the band. I'd go, when we'd work with you all, I wanted to hear the songs. I wanted to listen to the lyrics because you're kind of on your edge of your seat because you all paint, and you still do, you paint a picture while you sing. It's like, that's not a crowd, that's a blank canvas. And you're delivering your song, but you're painting the picture as you go. So I love that you said it that way because that just confirms what I've always felt about you and how that you deliver the songs. So
well, you just be the thing is to not even look for you know, I've heard in the marketplace they say, well, find a niche and fill it. Just do your thing. If it's marketable or good, then maybe it will find an audience. But the only choice in life is to be authentic and genuine. And if that works, that's great. If it doesn't, then go find the thing that you can be authentic and real in. But I was telling my songwriting class a while ago that, and I've just described how we kind of backed into gospel music. I could have just as very easily have backed in to some other form of creative writing, and have done that. I was telling them I might have been happy writing Christian novels or screenplays or whatever. That you can write, but since we were singing and the group needed songs, I can write. Why can't I write a song? And so what I learned is the shorthand within music that it looks like, okay, here's a book. Here's a book that might take you a few days to read, you know, because it's 300 pages or whatever. And then here's a song that lasts 3.5 or 4 minutes. It's how can I get the maximum emotional investment and impact out of a 4-minute song as someone that has read a book for 3 or 4 days and they've been living in that world for 3 or 4 days, you know, but I've only got them for 3 minutes, and I can resolve the most dire situation you could ever imagine. But the listener is still out there saying to themselves, well, I hate your situation, but quite frankly, I just met you a couple of minutes ago, you know, in this song. It's like the lady that's, you know, but what the song can do is, and we're talking about this, is a shorthand. It's a shorthand to emotion, where the first chapter of that book is using 4 or 5 pages to describe the setting. So you know what time period you're in, you know who the characters are, you know, they might start to introduce whatever the conflict is. in music, you can do that with 8 bars or 16 bars of music, because before the singer even sings, we can put you in a desert. We can put you on a rocking ship. We can put you in a church, and it's all musical cues. So it's a shorthand. And then, so by the time I get my first lyric out, hopefully you're already a third of the way there emotionally, because the music has led you to it.
Wow. We don't have time for all the questions I'm having. I'm going to call you next week. I'll ask some of these personally offline. Okay, here's the last little thing, and then we're going to take some questions. Okay. Last year, one of the questions was, if you could be any one of them, what insect would you be? Okay, that was a question last year.
That sounds very productive.
So just be thinking. So you may be one of the most rhythmic writers in our industry. Which I love that about you, because I don't do rap, but I can do front porch rap, and I almost today I'm like, that's what it is, because the whole that's front porch rap. So is the rhythm in all the word is it intentional?
Yes, okay. I have to know what the rhythm is, because my syllable count is higher than every other single. Take any other 2 songwriters in gospel music, and my syllable count is theirs plus a little bit more, probably in a song. And that's because I don't write around hooks. I've written my share because I have to put albums out.
Sure.
So I don't want every song on the album to sound the same.
Right.
But there are plenty of songs that are a verse, chorus, which is the chorus is kind of just it's the general idea, and then the verses are just a tad more specific. And then if you want to bump it up, you might add a bridge toward the end to really put the emphasis. Here's what the chorus is saying. Da 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 da. That's what a bridge is. It just right. Substitute that word at any bridge that you've heard that precedes any chorus, and that's what it's doing. Here's what the chorus is saying. God is powerful. God, da, da, da. That's what it is right there. So anyway, since I'm running around an idea and not necessarily around a hook, the trick is to find that there has to be a musical hook in it for it to be a song. But I do fill every available space where if a song is dun dun ba dun 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 dun, my verse is typically dun 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 ba dun 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 dun, because I've added that much more to every quarter note, because that's one more word, that's one more syllable in another word, and that's because I'm trying to get to not a hook to support it. But you heard the storytelling. I've got a story to tell, and I want to tell it as richly as I can.
I love it. 2 aspects to music that change genres of music. Obviously the lyrical content, but then rhythm. Rhythm is our musical element that totally changes one genre of music to another. I love the fact, so I'm hearing hookless writing. I'm thinking of fishing. So you're like...
Well, that's an old songwriting term. The hook is like, what's the thing? And a lot of times that's the title.
Correct, Champion of Love. Yeah. But I'm thinking hookless writing. I'm thinking of hookless fishing. So you're like noodling. You know how they get down in there and reach for that catfish without a hook?
Well, and a hook can be different things to different people. Every song has a hook.
Right.
But I'm not talking about this is it. Here's the line, and now everything that I sing is just in service to that. But that's too much of repeating the same idea. I don't like to dwell on the same idea. I want it to be moving forward. So even if it's a song that has a chorus that repeats, it means more the second time. If the second verse did its job, it means more the second. Well, the song that I just sang a while ago. Right. There was a lady who lived in our town. She lived alone above the grocery store. So it comes to, she's praying. So that first verse is, Let me be perfectly honest, this world never saw much in me. I've never had great wealth or honor, or my name in lights for the world to see. That's her praying. All of my life's been a simple life. It's that. So when you're listening to that verse for the first time, that's her praying. And then you listen to it, and then he's saying, I saw you praying. I'm praying for you. I hope God helps you through this. And then she says, what you heard is what he said to me. Let me be perfectly honest. This world never saw much in me. I've never had great wealth or armor or my name in lights for the world to see. I've always lived a simple life, humble beginnings and humble end. But let me be perfectly honest, all I really want to do is to call you friend. So now the verse means something else on the second time through. That's an O. Henry, what they call an O. Henry literary ending. And what it is it's a Twilight Zone episode. Right. Where you're watching an old Twilight Zone episode for 25 minutes, and then the last 5 minutes they pull the rug out from under you. And you, oh my gosh, that's not what I thought I was watching the whole time. I thought they were on Earth the whole time. Turns out they were on Mars or whatever, you know. It's
so cool.
So cool. And it's the same thing with Booth Brothers, Go Ask the Blind Man.
Right.
He saw it all. Or My Name is Lazarus with Rodney's song. Yeah. All of those are leading you up to something, and then there's that little bit of a twist at it. Oh, okay. So
cool.
And but it makes it register.
So I told them the other night I geek for behind the music documentaries and behind the songs and all that type of stuff. So this, even knowing you and knowing the history, this has been refreshing for me. Okay, questions. Anybody have a question for Mark?
Yes. Where is the bathroom?
I'm joking. I
see. You just found it. It's okay.
No, I was.
All right.
I was doing that for the benefit of the podcast.
Do we have a? No. Patrick's just stretching, right? Be careful. I'll sell you the car if you raise your hand right now. Yeah,
nobody wants to.
So what was your inspiration on met somebody on the way to the cemetery?
A preacher friend of mine in Orange, Virginia, Brother Darrell Harbin, was preaching that message. And in all honesty, in 40 years of writing songs, I should be sending royalty checks to preachers all across the country. Because a lot of the songs, there's not an album that I've recorded that there weren't 2 or 3 songs that weren't inspired by something that a preacher had said. In a lot of places that I go and I sing, sometimes they shut down the regular service so they can have the concert, but sometimes they'll have preaching, and I love that. I love when I go to a place and I get to listen to preaching, but very seldom do I hear a sermon from beginning to end, because of that songwriter filter that's in my head. At some point they will say something that will get caught. And then they're going this way still. They're still preaching, da-da-da-da-da-da. And I'm going, Let's see, that would be a bottom.
You're filling the back of a tithe envelope.
I can't help it. I can't help it. I'm chasing, I'm a squirrel.
Right.
And I'm chasing that song over here because I hear what it could be. And we were just talking about this in the songwriting class too. But in that particular one, I was singing at Brother Darrell's church in Virginia. And it was for their week-long revival. He had booked me to come and sing, so I sang for about a half an hour, and then he got up and preached. And at some point, he stood up and he said, Brother Mark, he said, I was going to hell, and it wasn't anything that I'd done, just being born. I was going to hell. He said, everybody in here, that's your trajectory, that's where you're going. He said, but when I was on my way, I met somebody on the way to the cemetery that changed everything. And I was tuned out. I was already writing. Oh, Lord, that's good. That's good. And he knows it. And but a lot of preachers, a good friend of mine down in Alabama called me up. This was a few years back. He said, Mark, our preacher said something in church this morning. He said, Brother Chris, I'm not a-looking for the signs anymore, brother. I'm a-listening for the call, amen. And he called me up. I wrote it on a Post-it note. I hung it in my office. I looked at it every day for 2 months. I couldn't figure it out. I prayed about it. Lord, help me with this. One morning I was downstairs on the treadmill, and I had a variable speed program where we'd kind of go up, down, fast, slow. At some point it hit a rhythm. It started going doom, chick, ka-chick-a-doom, chick-a-chick-a-doom, chick-a-chick-a-doom. I started to think about that song. Doom, chick-a-chick-a. When I was a little boy, I heard about the last days. Doom, chick-a-chick-a-doom, chick-a-chick-a-doom, chick. Some morning when the Lord will come again. Doom, ka-chick-a-ching-ching, ka-chick-a-ching-ching. It's the fastest I've ever written a song in my life. I had to write fast because I was looking at the timer on the screen and it was going to change in about 6 minutes to a different tempo. And I thought, I'm going to lose my drummer if I don't write fast.
Working backwards, because ask your question again, Dave, so we can have it on the mic.
Yeah, I just wanted to know what your inspiration was for I Met Somebody on the Way to the Cemetery.
Okay,
I'm
now,
glad
Mark,
you
you've already
asked.
answered this. Any other questions?
Which song that you have written would you say has done the most to move your career forward? Like, was the biggest turning point for you?
That's a good question. I don't know, because it was kind of gradual. Whenever we were with the Eddie Crook Company throughout the 80s, and then going into the 90s, we changed record companies. We went with Homeland in Nashville with Bill Traylor. And he didn't really know us. He knew that we were up and coming, and I had been writing for the group, but I wasn't writing everything. And so we came in, we signed the contract. He wanted to get things moving. He said, I want you guys to get in the studio, like in a couple of weeks. He said, we got to cut some songs. We won't cut the whole album, but let's go ahead and cut some singles so we can send something out. He said, so I've already got your single picked out. And I'm not going to name the songwriter because I don't want to embarrass him, but it's a very prominent songwriter in gospel music. And he said, I've already got your single. He said, do y'all want to we need to do 3 songs to make the session worthwhile, so we'll have them for the album. And then Kenny, my brother, said, well, Mark writes songs too. He said, fine, Mark, you write the other 2 songs. And so a couple of weeks later, we get in the studio, and we record. The first thing is the big hit song that he has prepared for us for this album from the big Nashville writer. And he said, Mark, what songs do you have? And he said, well, I've got one here that's called When Jesus Is All That I Have, He's All That I Need. And then I've got another one called You Can't Ask Too Much of My God. And we recorded those 2 songs. And then when we got through with all 3 of it, and it was mixed and everything, he said, okay, our first 2 singles are going to be You Can't Ask Too Much of My God.
Wow.
And then and so You Can't Ask Too Much of My God was a number 1 song. And then When Jesus Is All That I Have topped out for a couple of months at number 2. So we couldn't quite get it to number 1. But our first 2 songs with him were a number 1 and a number 2. And they were the backup songs. So probably You Can't Ask Too Much of My God, I guess, was at a pivotal time, I guess. But I don't know. The songs that I like the best are nobody else does. And the songs that I'm like, really? I'm like... I like it, or I wouldn't have written it.
Right.
But I'm always surprised. You can't, but maybe I can't look at it objectively either.
We got one last question, Jennifer.
You mentioned how with the idea for that song, you had it sitting for 2 months, and you had it, and you knew something was to it, it just wasn't coming to anything. What does it do to you emotionally when you have ideas like that and it's just not getting there? Like, how do you handle that?
It doesn't bother me at all. I don't get emotional about it because I don't have my phone with me, but my phone is filled with probably 300 song ideas that are, and this is another thing I was explaining to the class, is that I divide songwriting into a couple of sections. For me, there is the initial, Brighton, you know all about this. You've seen this firsthand. But there's the initial inspiration stage when I'm sitting in that church and that preacher preaches and he says something and that catches with me. And in that initial inspiration, maybe I'm driving to the next date and I'm just writing, I'm thinking about it furiously for a couple of hours, churning things over. You know, what is this song? What's it about? Is this a story? What is this? Is this a praise and worship? What is this? And maybe that results in a chorus and a bridge, or a chorus and a verse, or maybe 2 verses and half a chorus, whatever. I record onto my little phone whatever I've got, so I'll retain it. I'll have the melody and I'll have the lyrics, and then I'll have dozens and dozens of those. And then my co-producer, Jeff Collins from Crossroads, at some point he'll call me up and say, Mark, let's get some studio dates. And he said, start getting me some songs. Well, as soon as that happens, well, now I kind of quit that initial inspiration stage and move on to, I got to finish some songs. So I'll go through those 30 or 40 ideas. I'll pick out the 10 best that I like, that I think would make a cohesive album, a mixture of fast, slow, medium, genres, styles, whatever. And I'll finish those. And those are just hack it out. That initial inspiration, I have to try to get back to there in my head, but sometimes you just got to work for the song. So maybe I've got that inspired chorus and that inspired bridge, and that inspired verse, but I need another verse. Or I'm not happy with the lead-up line in this last verse to that final chorus. It needs to be bigger. And sometimes you just have to hack it out. And I have literally, songwriters, you don't have your thesaurus ready, but you know the word you've got to rhyme. And so I'm sitting on the front porch swing, and I know I'm leading up to a word that's cloud, and I'm bowed, cowed, dowed, found. It's not a true rhyme. It's close enough if you need it. Found. And I just sit there and go through the alphabet. And that sounds uninspired, but you can get to the place to where you can work with it and stuff. And then too, I rewrite my songs all the time up until the point that I have to record it. When I first go in with Jeff and we do pre-production, I give him the first set of lyrics. And we will arrange the songs and stuff. I say, okay, I think we need a modulation here. I hear this is a guitar song. I hear this is a piano song. This is a choir song. This is whatever and all that. Let's work on that. We'll work out some progressions and stuff. And then tracking day comes. I go in, he knows me. We've worked together for 24 years. He says, do you have the new lyrics? Because he knows I've rewritten that in the 2 or 3 weeks leading up to that. And then I do that. It's time for me to come in and do my vocals a couple of weeks later. And I walk in the door and he says, do you have the new lyrics? He knows I've rewritten it again. And I would keep rewriting. If any of the songs that have been recorded, if I had one more week, it would have been a different song. That's just happened to be what it was at that time.
All right, can we let Mark know how thankful we are that he came by today? Thanks for listening to the Charles Novell School of Music podcast, The Best Day Yet. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter under the name the Charles Novell School of Music. And for more information on CNS and our upcoming events, like our online school, our weekend regional sessions, our creative coaching, and our pastor's retreat, you can visit us at our website at www.cnsmusic.com. As you've listened to this episode, we hope that you've gained some information that you can apply to your music and to your ministry to make today the best day yet.